If you love Paul Harvey stories and the rest of the story, subscribe now. In the cold waters off the coast of California, a young Army private found himself struggling against the churning Pacific. His military aircraft now nothing more than scattered debris around him. The year was 1952. The water temperature hovered just above 50 degrees. Shore was over a mile away. Jack Turner was 22 years old that day, just another soldier serving his mandatory military service during the Korean War era. He wasn't supposed to be on that plane. A last-minute seat had opened up on the Douglas AD-1 Skyraider, a single-engine aircraft used primarily by the Navy. But Jack needed to get back to base, and this was his chance. The flight was routine until it wasn't. We were about 3 miles offshore when the engine started making this terrible grinding noise. Jack would recall years later. The pilot turned to me and said, "We're going down. Brace yourself." The impact was violent. The aircraft hit the water hard, breaking apart on contact. Jack was thrown clear, finding himself suddenly immersed in the frigid Pacific, disoriented and gasping for air. Several yards away, the pilot, Lieutenant Raymond Harris, was also in the water, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Swim!" shouted Harris. "We've got to make for shore before hypothermia sets in." Jack was a decent swimmer, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer power of the open ocean. Waves slapped against his face as he struggled to keep his head above water. His waterlogged uniform felt like it was made of lead, pulling him down with every stroke. "I thought about taking off my boots," Jack later told a reporter, but Lieutenant Harris warned me against it. He said, "The boots will fill with water and give your legs some buoyancy. Keep them on." For what seemed like hours, the two men swam toward the distant shoreline. Sometimes they could see it. Other times, when they found themselves in the trough between waves, they could see nothing but water walls on either side. "There were moments I wanted to give up," Jack admitted. "The cold was seeping into my bones. My muscles were cramping, but Harris wouldn't let me stop. He kept talking, kept encouraging me. 'Just think of someone waiting for you back home,' Harris had said. 'Someone who'd be heartbroken if you didn't make it back.'" Jack thought of his father, a hard-working man who had instilled in him a fierce sense of determination. He thought of his mother, who had wept when he'd been drafted. He thought of the girl he'd been writing letters to, wondering if they had a future together, and he kept swimming. The men took turns leading, each one breaking the current for the other when fatigue threatened to overcome them. They didn't talk much. Saving their energy was crucial, but when they did, it was with the gallows humor of men facing mortality together. "If we make it to shore," Harris had joked through chattering teeth, "drinks are on me. I'll hold you to that," Jack had replied. After nearly 2 hours in the water, their limbs numb and their minds foggy from exhaustion and cold, they felt sand beneath their feet. They had reached the shallows. Unable to stand, they crawled onto the beach, collapsing on the wet sand as waves still lapped at their legs. A nearby fisherman spotted them and called for help. Both men were treated for hypothermia and minor injuries. Lieutenant Harris received stitches for the gash on his head. Jack suffered no physical injuries beyond exhaustion and exposure, but the effects of that swim would stay with him for decades to come. "It changed me," Jack explained years later. "When you look death in the face like that, when you push your body far beyond what you thought was possible, you're never quite the same afterward." After his discharge from the Army in 1953, Jack returned to civilian life. He worked odd jobs for a while, as a lifeguard at a local pool, ironically enough, before finally finding his path. He had always been interested in acting, and with his tall, lean physique and handsome features, he found work easily enough. Small television roles led to larger ones. A series western made him a household name, but Jack Turner, now going by a stage name, never forgot those desperate hours in the Pacific. Decades later, when he began directing films himself, he often returned to themes of survival against overwhelming odds. Critics noted his unique ability to capture the psychological toll of life-threatening situations, the clarity of thought that comes with mortal danger, the strange calm that sometimes descends when options narrow to the most basic survive or don't. In 2016, At the age of 86, he directed a film about another miraculous water landing, the emergency ditching of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 in the Hudson River. Critics praised the film's unflinching portrayal of crisis decision-making and its authentic depiction of post-traumatic stress. When asked why he had chosen this particular story, the director replied simply, "I know something about water landings." Indeed he did, because Jack Turner was born Clinton Eastwood Jr., the man we know today as Clint Eastwood. And now you know the rest of the story. Good day.